All right, let's just dive right in. You've seen the sci-fi movies, right? The ones with some supercomputer that can predict the future down to the day. But what if someone was trying to build that for real? Not just with cold, hard math, but by blending it with a really deep, almost spiritual understanding of what makes us human. We're about to explore a pretty wild new take on history. So, this is the big one. This is a question this whole explainer is really about. Could we actually model the rise and fall of entire civilizations? Could some algorithm forecast the next big global crisis? Or maybe even the next great leap forward for humanity? It sounds like pure fiction, but the theory we're digging into today suggests, well, maybe it's not so impossible after all. The whole framework is called psychohistory. And yeah, if that name is ringing a bell, you're probably a fan of Isaac Asimov's Foundation series. But this is a totally unique spin on it. It takes that core sci-fi idea, predicting the future with math, and injects it with these huge concepts like karma, divine influence, and the spiritual evolution of our species. At the very heart of this model is one powerful assumption. History isn't just one random thing happening after another. It actually has a direction. The idea is that it's a process, one that's allowed by some kind of divine intelligence, and it's always moving toward a state of what the theory calls harmonizing complexity. So every war, every plague, every invention, it's all a step on that same path.
Okay, so if history has a direction, what's pushing it? What's the engine that's actually driving everything forward? Well, the theory says it comes down to a few fundamental forces that are constantly at play.
This right here, this single idea, is basically the psychological engine for the entire model. It suggests that our collective blind spots, our hate, our fear of the other, all of that creates this tension that can only ever be resolved when we finally understand the thing we hated. Just think about it. You see it in cycles of oppression and revolution, where the oppressed group eventually has to understand the mindset of their oppressor to truly break free for good. And this tension is basically a constant battle between two opposing forces. On one side, you've got the ego. That's the disruptor. It's fueled by this illusion that we're all separate, that it's us versus them. It grows just like a debt, piling up misunderstandings until the whole thing collapses. And on the other side, you have altruism. That's the builder. It's fueled by empathy, by the idea that we are all connected, and it grows like an investment. Slowly, for sure, but it builds a world that's more resilient and harmonious. History, from this point of view, is just the story of that conflict.
So, how does the universe keep all this in balance? The model proposes there's a kind of feedback loop, and it operates on three totally different levels. These scales go from the really immediate to the absolutely massive. First, there's the personal level. What goes around comes around. The consequences of your actions find their way back to you in your own life. Simple enough. Then, there's the generational level. This is where unresolved issues, those deep-seated hatreds get passed down, and the descendants often have to deal with the fallout from what their ancestors did. And then there's the big one, civilizational. This is when the collective debt of the ego gets so huge that the entire society is forced into a massive corrective event.
Now, this whole engine of ego versus altruism, balanced by this karmic feedback, isn't just some philosophical idea. The model argues that it creates these observable cycles, or resets, that you can see all throughout our recorded history. And these are the so-called resets. The best way to think of them is like historical pressure valves. When a civilization's collective ego, all its greed, its division, its hate, hits a critical point, it literally triggers its own collapse. But this self-destruction isn't just pointless chaos. It's seen as a necessary reset, clearing the board to make room for something new, something more harmonious to rise up from the ashes. And this isn't just an abstract thing. The theory points to huge historical collapses as proof. The Bronze Age collapse, it didn't just weaken civilizations, it wiped a bunch of them clean off the map. The Black Death, it completely shattered the rigid structure of feudalism, and that's what paved the way for the Renaissance. The intense nationalism of the early 1900s, it self-destructed in 2 world wars, which then forced us to create things like the UN. And even the 2008 financial crisis is seen as a smaller-scale reset,
a direct consequence of unchecked corporate greed. Okay, so we've got the philosophy. But you might be thinking, how on earth do you turn all of that into a predictive model, into math? Well, that was the next step, to try and formalize all these big ideas into an actual working algorithm. The algorithm really just boils down to these 4 core parts. You've got altruism, the builder; ego, the disruptor; karma, the threefold balancer that makes sure actions have consequences; and then, and this is my favorite part, you have a divine wildcard. This is basically the X factor. It's for the truly unpredictable stuff, the acts of God, the asteroid impacts, the unknown unknowns that can just show up and shove history onto a completely different track. But here's the kicker. This wasn't just left on a chalkboard as a cool theory. An early version of this very algorithm was actually programmed into a computer to run a simulation of human history, starting way back at the year 0. So obviously the million-dollar question is, how did it do? How well could this spiritually charged algorithm actually predict the messy, chaotic story of the last 2,000 years of human history? Just look at this. The results are startling, to say the least. The simulation predicted a major societal reset right around the year 1346, the Black Death, which completely upended medieval Europe, kicked off in 1347. It flagged a reset around 1921, that chaotic period after World War I that led straight into the Great Depression. It pointed to 1965, the absolute peak of the Cold War and massive social revolutions around the world. And it predicted a reset in 2009, the year the globe was still reeling from the financial crisis. The correlations are, they're frankly a little spooky. So what's the big takeaway from all this? What's the point? The theory suggests that maybe we need to completely reframe how we look at our world. It's not just a battlefield, it's not a marketplace, it's something else. And it all leads to this final core metaphor. Earth is a kindergarten. In this view, we're a very young species, and we're just learning the most basic lessons of how to get along, how to share, how to have empathy, how to move from the ego of mine to the altruism of ours. All of human history, with all its pain and all its glory, is just our messy, chaotic, but maybe guided curriculum. Which, of course, leaves us with one last, huge, provocative question to chew on. If all of human history up to this point has just been kindergarten, and we're seeing all these signs of accelerating change and potential resets all around us, does that mean we might actually be on the verge of graduating? What comes after kindergarten? Well, that's anyone's guess.